Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the 2017 5K iMac and see if this specific device is still worth buying in 2023. Now, I will definitely tell you, I love iMacs. I used to use a 5K 2015 iMac every single day. And when I was using that Mac, I was like, I'm never going to go to like a MacBook approach where I would just have a MacBook and dock it up at some times and then just go from there. But after these M1 models came out, I kind of started liking the MacBook Pros more. But with the 2017 iMac, these things have fallen in price quite a bit. They're still very, very good displays. They're still very decent MacBooks or decent Macs as well. And if you want to pick up a Mac, I will definitely say an iMac is a good choice. I will leave some link down in the description so you can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. But I will say if you want, you might want to wait until the next iMac comes out if there is another one. If not, the M1 iMac might be a better one for you. We'll talk about that later on. But with this 5K iMac, this was one of the last big Macs you could buy, Big Mac. There's also the 2020 iMac that Apple made as well. But this one was a pretty big change coming from the Intel one right before this one, which was the 2015 one, which is the one I had. Now, design-wise, looks almost identically the same on the front compared to the 2015 model. I genuinely don't think there was any difference. There may have been like maybe a little bit of screen brightness going up or camera improved on the front, but this was pretty much the exact same type of build that you were getting on the 2015 iMac. So you were still getting pretty thick bezels around this display. You were getting a massive, massive chin on the bottom of this Mac as well. But one thing is for sure, it doesn't look like an ugly device. Like it doesn't look like an ugly PC. Even for a display, it looks pretty good. And when I was using my iMac, I never really had any problems with the bezels or with the chin. And I complain about a lot of stuff. I think some of you may know that. Like I complain about so many things. But with this iMac, I never really found myself complaining about it too much. It was, I was looking at the panel, everything else kind of blended in, and I never really thought about it other than that. So I still think the design of this thing looks very good, but that display is still so good. This display can last forever. If you were to buy this iMac like 10 years from now, this would still be an outrageous display. Maybe by then we'll have like 10K panels that are just the norm, but this is a beautiful display. It's 60 Hz, so it's not 120 Hz or anything like that, but this is still an awesome advantage of buying a Mac like this. And I always think if Apple just let us have the ability of using our iMac as third-party displays for other devices, these people will just buy a lot of used iMacs instead of buying a separate monitor, because for the price of this iMac, this powerful of a machine, and that display can definitely cost you. So I do like the ability of having this type of Mac there because it's not as expensive as you may think when you kind of think about the modularity of it as well as the display. Now you have the stand, you can kind of mess around with it a little bit, but on the back there's definitely a lot of stuff going on with this specific model. So for one, a really cool thing that you do actually have with these types of Macs is that you have the ability of upgrading your RAM. So you can actually go through and pretty much upgrade the RAM within your Mac natively. Nowadays, it is impossible to do it on our M1 iMac, but even on our MacBook Pros now, I don't think we have that capability anymore either. But on these iMacs, we did, and it came natively. You could just buy your RAM sticks online, just go ahead and pop them in there, and that's all you're going to have to do. And that's what I did a few times. And actually, with my 2015 iMac, I was actually, to give you some perspective, I'm not somebody who's good with, taking apart hardware technology and stuff, but I was actually able to take apart my iMac, my 5K iMac, which is pretty much the same thing as this, and I was able to upgrade the hard drive to an SSD. So even somebody like me who is not super technical in terms of hardware, that's still a very, very, big statement, because you can buy a 2017 iMac that has a Fusion drive or that has a hard drive, and you can upgrade the SSD yourself and save even more money, and you can upgrade the RAM and save even more money that way. So there's still a lot of flexibility with this Mac, even though it's not made to be taken apart and all that. It still is, still an option that you have there. Now, on the port selection side, this was the first iMac to bring USB-C and even Thunderbolt 3 ports at all. So before this, we didn't really have that type of capability. We had Thunderbolt 2 ports as well as the standard USB ports. But here we actually had a 3.5 headphone jack. So we had not 3.5 headphone jacks, a 3.5mm headphone jack. We had an SD card slot. We had 4 USB 3 ports. So keep that in mind. 4 USB 3. We had 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. So these were USB-C, which was awesome. And these could be used as display ports. You can do Thunderbolt, you can do USB 3.1, Thunderbolt 2, sold separately, but it was capable of Thunderbolt 2. You had an Ethernet port as well. And that kind of I/O, again, to have inside of a device like this is beautiful. And when you were getting a device like the 5K iMac from 2017, you were honestly getting a Mac that was fairly future-proofed. You have to keep in mind, even nowadays, there's still lots of devices that, basically still kind of rely on standard USB ports, and this thing has it. But it also has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports as well. So if you wanted to go ahead and grab one of the latest, USB-C monitors, well, you had that type of capability and you can go ahead and use it within this Mac. And that's something that I still look at this Mac and I'm still very, very happy with the way Apple approached it. They could have still easily gave us maybe like one USB port or one USB-C port, but they gave us a couple options here, which was really, really nice. I feel like though by this time they kind of had to do it, because, they were kind of running out of things to kind of add onto a Mac without changing the design, so it is kind of understandable. But on the outside, I still think it looks good, doesn't look ugly, but definitely it was kind of needed for a design change, and I'm glad they changed it a little bit. I'm just kind of waiting for the next iMac. Now on top of that, in terms of the internal power, we had a few different options you can kind of spec this thing out to. So for one, you basically had, you had the Intel chipset inside. We all know that you can spec this thing out to different models. But from a power standpoint, I will say this thing was still very powerful from the last time I used it. And even now, it still is. It's not an overly powerful machine, but you have to remember Apple's relationship with Intel is kind of gone. And Apple's main focus now is the M1 and M2 models. So because of that, they're not really going to bring the craziest amount of features to these Intel models. But the craziest thing is that there's still lots of advantages of buying a 5K iMac. For example, although the power may not be as high as something like the M1 models, well, you do actually have the capability of installing full-fledged Windows on your iMac. And I'm not talking about like a virtualized environment or anything. I'm talking about an actual, Windows boot camp you can actually install that you can boot into. And you can basically use everything from your standard machine, the ports, everything that you normally could do with a virtualized system inside of your actual physical, Windows installation, which is amazing. Apple removed this with the M1 models ever since they made their Apple Silicon, but it's still a very nice thing you have on these Intel machines. And on my old 5K iMac, I am still constantly booting into Windows because it just makes things so much easier for me to do certain things. So that's a super cool thing that you have there, and you have that capability within your 5K iMac from 2017. So even though the power may not be as high as the M1 models, you're still getting some really cool features from your Intel models, which is really cool. On top of that, I still think the power is decent. And, of course, if you're comparing it to the M1, M2 models, it's not going to be the same. But this thing still has lots of power. It still has lots of, capability behind it. And I will tell you, if you're in the market for an iMac, if you're okay with maybe not getting the latest and greatest, and you're okay with basically getting like a 6-year-old machine as of this point, then this is not a horrible option. There's definitely worse things you can buy, but I just don't know if I would necessarily buy this specific model. I would probably look at maybe seeing if you can swing for something, maybe even like an M1 MacBook Air. I know that sounds crazy, but if you can buy like an M1 MacBook Air to save some money and maybe like the LG 4K display, something like that, well, maybe you might be okay with, I would say that probably will cost the same price as this thing, and you probably would get a better experience from that machine than this one. If you can kind of swing for like a MacBook, like an M1 Pro or M1 MacBook, model with a decent display kind of configuration, that might be a better option than this one. If there's a reason you need an Intel machine, then this is not a bad option. But these things haven't fallen in price as crazy as, the M1 models, the older M1 models have. So you might be able to swing for an M1 model with a display rather than just getting this, this Intel iMac. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that helps me so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.